Good morning and welcome to the November 22nd, 2022 special board meeting of the Mesa Planning and Zoning Board. I'm Jeff Crockett. We will begin with a roll call this morning. Again, I'm Chair Crockett, I'm present. Vice Chair Ayers.
Here.
Board Member Allen.
Here.
Board Member Sarkisian.
Here.
Board Member Peterson.
Here.
Board Member Pitcher.
Here.
And Board Member Montez.
Here.
Great. We've got everyone here today. Thank you for being out so early on a Tuesday morning before Thanksgiving. We have a couple of items on the agenda today, neither of which will be on the consent agenda. So I will turn the time over to Michelle to run the meeting this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. The first item on the agenda is the minor general plan amendment amending existing Chapter 7, the community character of the This Is My Mesa, Mesa 24 general plan. And Rachel Nettles is here to make a presentation to you on this item.
Oh. Is the mic? Okay, there it goes.
There we go.
This
Good
is
morning.
like deja vu. So this is the second public hearing of these proposed text amendments. So we are proposing some text amendments to the general plan. As a little bit of a background, our current 2040 general plan was adopted by Mesa citizens in 2014. This is our official policy guide guiding the development within the city. Per the ARS, we do review this annually, and sometimes we do make recommendations for certain amendments to the general plan. The last time we did so was in 2020 when we amended Chapter 7 and Chapter 16. And at that time, we had changed some of the size criteria for the major and minor general plan amendments. And we also added specific approval criteria for council to consider in those instances. And then in Chapter 7, we added primary and secondary zoning districts to many of our character areas and also established minimums of primary and secondary that have to be established, as well as discuss the timing of when those have to be established. So today we are coming forward with some recommendations to Chapter 7 and specifically the specialty districts. With those, we're recommending amendments to the educational and the medical campus subtypes. So just very broadly for the specialty districts, those are intended to support a single use and it's supposed to be developed in a campus-like setting. So staff has been evaluating these and we do recognize that in some instances we think that it is appropriate to have supportive residential uses in the medical and the educational campus subtypes. So therefore we're going to be recommending some changes there. So as a background, currently the educational subtype has a list of primary and secondary zoning districts. The primary zoning has to be established before secondary zoning can be utilized. So the majority of the character area, which we define as 55% or more, has to be developed with those primary zoning districts and land uses. And once those have been established, the secondary districts can be used. Staff is recommending that we add multiple residence 4 and multiple residence 5 as secondary zoning districts to this subtype. We are also recommending some exemptions to the timing of when those secondary zoning districts can be utilized. So with this, we would be suggesting that if there was an anchor establishment, and I apologize for the typo on this, so if it was an anchor educational facility, that the secondary districts could be used before the 55% of the character area was established with primary uses. This does not change the overall percentage that would be required for primary and secondary zoning, just the timing of when they could be established. Then moving on to the medical campus subtype, once again, we have a list of primary and secondary zoning districts. In this case, 80% of the area has to be established with those primary zoning districts before secondary is allowed. And with this subtype, staff is recommending once again to have that exemption from the timing of when the secondary zoning districts could be utilized. And that would be if there was an anchor medical facility that they would be able to use the secondary zoning first. But also it does not reduce, once again, the amount of primary and secondary overall that has to be established within the area, just the timing of it. So that's a very quick recap of that presentation. And I know there were a few questions that came up before, so I wanted to address those. We had mentioned a map, and I couldn't find the specific map that just isolated the specialty districts. But if you can see on your screen, the specialty districts are these blue areas here. So looking at the breakdown of this, when we look at the overall planning area within the city, so that blue box, and this encompasses some areas that are currently not within the city, but we anticipate that are, within our growth area that could be annexed in. In that case, specialty districts compose 8% of the overall area within the city. When we look specifically at just within city limits currently, so not considering those areas outside that haven't been annexed yet, specialty districts compose 6.7% of the area within the city. So specifically, we were talking about where in the city other educational and medical campuses exist. So I can point out a couple of these. So if we go over on the west side, over by Dobson and Southern, we have Banner over here, which is a medical campus, right next to an educational campus, which would be our MCC area. We also have several other educational campuses near high schools. So we have Dobson High School is another campus, as well as when we go up towards Westwood, we have another one. It's just several other high school campuses that count as that. And then going to the medical, once again, if we go to the southeast portion of Mesa, once again, we have a mixture of educational and medical campuses over here as well. So it's very limited areas within the city that this would affect, is what I'm trying to get to when we talk about the percentage of land area that's designated as specialty. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions if you have any at this time about the amendments.
Great, thank you for that presentation. Are there questions for Rachel on this item? Board Member Sarkisian?
So, I guess I'm going to ask a question, but I don't know if there's a way to, based on our discussion downstairs, how you're going to answer. But so you're talking about, you were showing us some of the educational areas. You had some Westwood areas, some areas around the high school areas that looked like there was some like Falcon Field, Mesa Gateway, obviously those ones. But the ones that looked like they were more focused and educational, they seemed to be a little bit smaller. And so you have those as RM4, RM5. I think those are appropriate, but it was just because you originally had said that the RM5 was more for dormitories, but in a lot of those areas, I don't feel like those are very dormitory or high density appropriate, but it's a general plan, so we can always zone according to density. Whereas the medical is only shown as RM4, and I feel like the medical specialty areas that were focused along the freeways and high intensity areas and larger, they actually, I felt, were more, appeared to be more appropriate for an RM5 along those high intensity corridors. And I feel, we'll discuss it in the next case, but I feel like that RM5 would also be appropriate in the medical to be added, and it would alleviate a lot of other issues. And we could still rezone and not rezone in those areas, but I feel like those areas shown on that specialty area for medical were in those zones and areas that felt and were larger and less in neighborhoods for that density and then the ones that are shown in the educational. That's my comment. I was just trying to see like how if there's, I don't know if there's really anything you want to say back to that, but it just felt like that was what I was getting at the map, why we asked for the map downstairs to see like where this would impact it. So that's kind of my comment. Like, I do feel the RM5 is appropriate in certain areas educational, but in some of those areas, hopefully we obviously get a chance to rezone or deny an RM5 in those areas because it's not as appropriate. But that was kind of weird because I feel like almost the RM5 is too much in that area for educational, whereas it should have been in the medical, and it's kind of reversed. It's my thoughts.
Okay.
Chair, Board Member Sarkisian, so when I had mentioned the dormitories, I guess I wasn't intending it just to be in reference to that, but in general, staff's evaluation and thought process behind that is where there is educational campuses, that's where higher density residential would make sense because it is providing housing sometimes for students in that case. So I don't know if that helps clarify a bit.
Okay, other questions? Board Member Peterson.
So if and that's where my line of questions were in the previous hearing too, was that it seems to make a lot of sense if not RM5 in medical specialty also, or in lieu of educational. Is there, as far as that text amendment, is that something is that an actionable thing for that we could modify if there's enough support to do that, or is that what's the process for that?
I don't know
So
if there.
let me see. So if I understand the question, Board Member Peterson, is could you modify the proposal today on the minor general plan amendment to add RM5
The text.
to the text amendment to the medical
Correct.
subcharacter area?
The Planning Commission could have a different recommendation than staff, but in the end, so the recommendations would go to City Council. If that is what the planning recommendation wanted to recommend is adding it, you would have the ability to do that. Staff would consider that and they would make their recommendation to City Council as well.
Understood. And along with Board Member Sarkisian's comments, you look at those, the medical, which are focused around the existing hospitals, higher density areas, more in line with downtown Mesa, Power Road, around the hospital there. It does seem to make more sense.
Okay. I have a question. So Rachel, in those areas that we looked at on the map that are they're educational subcharacter areas, it looks like they all have educational facilities in them. Is that right?
Chair, that's correct.
Okay, and here we would be creating really a relatively small little island of 10 acres or so that would be a educational subcharacter area?
That's the next case.
Or what? No, I'm saying but isn't that, oh, I see. The text amendment simply allows the changes. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Other questions for Rachel at this point? All right, thank you. We'll invite the applicant up now to make a presentation.
So procedurally,
Oh, yeah. See, that's what happens when we plan these early morning meetings. So we need to have a vote on this public hearing. All right, so we'll get back to you, Mr. Humantle. All right, so let's open the public hearing on this item and see if there's any one from the public that wants to speak to this item. We do have one blue card. This is Mr. Charles Humantle. Would you please come up and state your name and business address again for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes on this item.
I will. I believe there's a second speaker as well. Charles Humantle,
Okay.
P.O. Box 1833, Tempe, Arizona, 85280. I know I'm going to have a chance to speak later as well, so I'll be pretty brief at this point in time. I think one point I'd like to make, as you discussed, making modifications to the general plan in general, and specifically modifications to the text amendments that staff has proposed. is that, the general plan is not a holy document. It changes intentionally. In fact, the law requires that cities look at it on an annual basis to see what should change. It also is not lost on me that you're about to start an entirely new revision of the general plan. So you're about to start your public process, I believe, on what the next 10-year general plan will be. And if you're not completely happy with where things are today, you have that opportunity as well to move things forward. I'd also point out that if the general plan worked effectively without making changes to it from time to time, we probably wouldn't have the housing crisis that we have. Those are the only comments I have for this case, but of course I'll want my opportunity to speak again as the applicant in the next case.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we've got Dave Richens that would like to speak. Welcome.
Hello, Chair, board members. As you know, I spent way too much time of my life in this building, and I try to come back rarely. And I only like to come back when it's important. And so this is something that I feel is very important. The general plan is something that I feel passionate about, getting those things right, and AT Still University and the success and flourishing of our HEAT initiative and those educational facilities is really important to me. And it's a great facility. If you haven't been over there, I suggest a tour. I support this change on the part of staff and Mr. Peterson. I think you're on an interesting track about the flexibility, which I think you're driving at RM4, RM5. We get wrapped around the axle on these terms. But the percentages were not in the last general plan the voters voted on. This was part of the annual review process. We added them to the general plan, and we sometimes as policymakers don't get it exactly right, and we have to tweak it. And what triggers a tweak is typically a case like this. So you don't have a lot of precedent, Chairman Crockett, because this has only been in place since 2020. And so percentages can be very inflexible sometimes, particularly if you have a good project that is coming ahead. A lot of people, hey, rooftops come first and then development follows behind. And this is, a case where you have a site that was owned 25 years ago and it still sat. So I would argue that, did we get the zoning right on this? Let's probably see, we probably didn't. And that's why it's been sitting for a long, long time. So it's time to rethink that, and it's okay. That's okay. That's why we have planning and zoning boards. We love recommendations from planning and zoning boards because they think through stuff. Sometimes councils overrule planning and zoning boards. That's okay because they have other considerations they need to make, whereas you guys are looking at, a concerted layout for the city. Mr. Humantel's correct. We are about to embark on a general planning process, and one of the deficiencies of a general plan is it doesn't necessarily take into consideration adjacent uses in other cities. And as was pointed out earlier, Banner at Higley is in Gilbert. And so we have chosen to have to completely ignore the adjacent land use, even though it has a material effect on what happens here. I would hope that, and the reason we put humans and we don't just crunch numbers and do computers is because we have the ability to reason. And I feel that this is a very reasonable addition to AT Still. Not only are they excited to see it come, but it also will help enable them to expand into the future. So I hope you'll consider approval of this amendment.
Hey, thank you for being here. Before you jump away from the microphone, just provide your address for the record, if you would.
You gonna stock my house?
No, I'm not going
Just kidding. 833 West 11th Place, still in the same place for 25 years.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I'm more worried about you stalking my house, so.
I know where you live, Jeff.
Thank you. All right. Is there any other public comment on this item? I don't,
Chair, I've been asked to try to clarify maybe some of the staff's thinking behind not recommending the RM5 in the medical subtype. So
should we close the public comment first before we do that? Or do we need to leave that open? Okay, getting the high sign. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment on this item, and then we'll invite Rachel back up to address
okay.
some things.
So when staff looked at the intent of the different subtypes, we really do not feel the RM5 is appropriate for the medical campus when we look at kind of the intent for it. Just going back to what I was trying to explain earlier, we do see that in the educational, where we may have bigger facilities for students, that a higher density housing product would be appropriate there. But in the medical campus, there still would be allotment for high density residential, but in those cases, we also have allowances for hotels and other supportive uses that are more compatible to what's the service in those areas. So that's kind of the reasoning behind why staff is not. And once again, we are very selective about where we approve the RM5 zoning, because it is the highest density residential zoning district in the city. So I don't know if that helps provide a little bit of clarification behind that thinking there.
It does, thank you. And just, I guess, directly to the point, would staff support an amendment to this item that would add RM5 to the medical subcharacter area?
Staff had already considered that, and that was not a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I guess, Board Member Montez.
How long has this area been vacant?
Well, are we talking about
Like
the
a
next?
little
Are you
area.
talking about the?
Oh.
That's the next case, so we can bring that up on the next case. All right, so if there, Board Member Sarkisian, we're going to have some
Yeah.
discussion on this in a moment, but do you have questions for staff?
No, I was just going to start discussion.
Okay, well then let's do it. Please, go ahead.
So yeah, I think with given the examples that we have, I still feel that, I still feel like the density in certain areas, we've talked about the educational, there are a lot of, or the medical too, there are a lot of hotels that serve the patients and things like that as well. But with everything that's been going on with the medical industry as well, we've been seeing a high intense traveling nurses and doctors and things like that. And we've been seeing a lot of like Banner across the street and some other places where they rent out a great deal of apartments for their doctors and nurses as they travel through. And in certain areas, I feel a lot of these RM4s and things like that were previously built before these big major hospitals came in. We had smaller facilities and now they're getting to be institutions. Banner's taking over a lot of stuff. And so I just feel as in you would see it, I mean, we always hope to be, we're not downtown Phoenix, but when you surround yourselves with the medical, you're seeing high intense residential. I mean, when they get to that point, and I do feel in the future, because this is a general plan, I do feel Mesa's going that way of a major metropolitan downtown and major facilities, along, with the Williams Gateway, but also on Power and along the 60. I think those areas are just going to continue to grow, and we need to be able to accommodate that density that's needed there.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Peterson.
Yeah, so just a few thoughts. I think and we're down in a rabbit hole in the general plan, and understand these things are flexible. It feels like probably the specialty areas should both say multifamily. Multifamily uses are allowed, and then as far as specific RM4, RM5, that's a zoning level thing to decide case by case, kind of like we talked about, but understanding where we are with the current general plan. The uses, and I think it's important too that we're not talking about with the RM5 that's not a smaller dormitory type use necessarily. What that's saying is different, different setbacks, different heights of buildings, and you're still talking, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, kind of typical apartments. That it's not like this. The density comes from the setbacks and the heights differences, and not necessarily from that we're saying these are dormitories, because that word's been used a lot, and I think that throws people off, because that I don't think we're talking about that under any scenario. We're talking about, do we go higher and tighter with the densities, or do they stay less? And so and with the case now, it I guess the easy route is to adopt it or to recommend adoption per staff recommendation, and then to deal with the next case, the merits of the next case accordingly. But I think adopting it, if we were to add RM5 to medical, then that makes a lot of the confusion and the paradox and the fiction that you referenced for future cases to be less confusing, because it creates a more direct route to for options. And again, understanding that we're not talking specific zoning, and nor will we. That case already came through and has already gone through. So we're not even that'll be left up for City Council to decide. It feels like from a looking at future situations that and where the general plan is right now, it just seems appropriate to go with the recommendations of the text amendment, and to add to that to allow RM5 in medical specialty areas, and then let each case stand on its merits from there. And that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Peterson. I don't support the text amendment here. I appreciate all the work that staff does, and I typically do support staff recommendations. But I think that what we're doing here is we're adopting text amendments that really are focused on allowing a vote on a specific project where staff is recommending denial. And so I find us in this odd position of, on the one hand, approving a text amendment that will facilitate a vote on a proposal on a project that staff is opposing. So I don't believe that we've seen a showing by staff on this that there's a true need in the city for these text amendments on this item. We are starting the process of a new general plan. We can look at all of these things, including, some of the issues that have been brought up regarding hospitals and where things have headed, and whether we need to look at different types of zoning characterizations around those facilities, educational facilities. But I think it should be done in the context of a broader planning process, and not done for the purpose, which appears to be the case here, to facilitate a vote on another specific zoning case, which probably wouldn't get a vote based on the current general plan without this text amendment. So those are my concerns about it. I think that this is not the best way to make policy for the city. And that's part of what I think the struggle we've seen today around this issue, trying to get to a resolution, is we're trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole on this. So those are my thoughts. Any other thoughts from board members? Board Member Allen, please.
Thanks, Chair. If I could, I agree with your sentiments. I don't support the text amendments either. And my reason for not supporting them is I think the unintended consequences, like Board Member Sarkassian mentioned earlier, Westwood area, if we put that high density housing in next to I don't think it's appropriate to be next to a high school, either there or by Mountain View or a lot of the other high schools around. And I think that this might have unintended consequences that we're just not looking at. And I think what we need to do is maybe, like you said, revisit this when we redo the general plan. Might be more appropriate than more project specific, because to me that's what it is. We're approving this so that there's an opportunity to approve this project that we're going to talk about next. But that's my thoughts on it as well.
Thank you, Board Member Allen. Board Member Pitcher?
Yeah, I too can't support this one. I'm concerned about the unintended consequences, like Board Member Allen suggested. I really do feel that this is a way to facilitate the second case. And so I don't think that's the way to make policy. let's let's proceed with the vote unless there's other.
Okay. Board Member Ayers, any thoughts you want to share on this item?
I think, actually, I'm very much aligned with you as well on this one, to be completely honest at this point. I think I do actually really like the ideas that we're talking about, that Troy was speaking about earlier, allowing flexibility through the residential zoning as we move forward into cases like this. I think that's much more useful as we look into the future, but I think that I'm in agreement with you guys, what you've just said right now, as far as this particular case.
Thank you. Board Member Montez, thoughts? No? Okay. All right, well, is there any other discussion from board members on this item? Okay, you're not raising your hand, are you? Okay. All right, just checking. Okay, well then, we have this item 1A on the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda item?
I'd like to make a motion, although I know it's going to happen. But I'd like to make a motion, so it's on the record, that we approve a minor general plan amendment to amend the existing Chapter 7 community character area. This is my Mesa 2040 general plan as shown in Exhibit 1, 2022 general plan amendments to include where not revised permitting secondary zoning districts in the specialty district, educational campus subtype, and revising the time of when secondary zoning districts and secondary land uses are permitted in the specialty district, educational campus subtype, and the specialty district medical campus for adoption with the addition of the the R5 to the medical specialty character area.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Sarkisian to approve agenda item 1A with a modification that would add the RM5 zoning designation to the medical
Yep.
subcharacter area.
Yes.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Second?
Okay, you have a motion and a second. Let's go ahead and vote. Well, before we vote, okay, let's, I think I'm clear on this. Let's go ahead and vote. Board Member Ayers, how do you vote?
Just one quick question. This is adding the RM5, correctly? That's the change to?
This,
To this?
yes, voting for this item with the addition of adding RM5 to the medical subcharacter area. Specialty area.
Yes.
Okay, Board Member Ayers votes yes. Board Member Montez? Or Board Member Allen, sorry.
No.
Okay, by your vote of 4 yeses and 3 noes, you have passed this item. Okay, Michelle, on to the next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. The next item is KZON 22-01129. This is a minor general plan amendment request for the property known as Millennium Superstition Springs. And Cassidy is here to present the item to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. So this case is item ZON 22-01129. The request is for a minor general plan amendment to allow for multiple residence development. The previous zoning request, which would change the zoning to RM5 with the planned area development overlay, was heard by the Planning and Zoning Board on September 14th with a 3-3 split vote. So the site is located north of Baseline Road and west of Sunview Road, also west of Power Road. So the current general plan designation for this property is specialty with a medical campus subtype. So the intent is to develop these areas around large single users with associated secondary uses. There's also an intent in the general plan to preserve prime employment land uses. The request would modify that subtype from a specialty medical campus to a specialty educational campus. And the specific intent for the educational campus is for college and high school campuses with some associated accessory uses. This proposed general plan amendment would only apply to the subject 10-acre site. So this proposed request is tied to the general plan text amendments. So in order for the proposed zoning of RM5 to be approved on the site, the text amendments must be approved to allow RM5 within the specialty educational campus subtype. So the proposed zoning, as we discussed, is multiple residence 5 with a planned area development overlay. And staff feels that the proposed zoning is not consistent with the intent for the area and the intent of that specialty character area designation. So as we discussed in the previous public hearing, there's kind of 2 points that staff is analyzing when looking at whether or not to support or oppose this case, and one of those is compliance with the general plan. The other is when you're looking at a minor general plan character areas, the criteria per Chapter 16 of the general plan, and part of that criteria say consistency with the surrounding development. And so when we look at the proposed development, we find that the proposed multiple residence is at the subject density, which is approximately 40 dwelling units per acre, is not consistent with the surrounding area. There's the A.T. Still University to the northeast. There's a proposed industrial development immediately to the north. There are some existing multiple residence developments within the specialty character area. Those are at approximately 17 dwelling units per acre, so significantly less than what this proposed development would allow. So again, kind of reiterating staff's opposition to the proposed development, the proposed minor general plan amendment would be to the educational campus. It would only apply to that 10-acre site. It would be developed entirely with secondary uses, and under that analysis, staff finds that it doesn't meet the intent of the educational campus subtype, as well as they would be permitted to develop the site with an RM4 zoning without a minor general plan amendment as it stands today. Economic development is not in support of the proposed development. Their intent is to preserve those designated commercial industrial areas for future job growth and make sure that they are improving the job to housing ratio. That's consistent with the kind of overarching goals of the general plan as well. And so going back to the criteria for Chapter 16, is the proposed development consistent with the general plan? When you look at that goal to preserve and protect those employment areas, we cannot find consistency with that criteria. The applicant did conduct a citizen participation process, which included property owners within 1,000 feet. Neither the staff nor applicant have heard any contact from surrounding properties about the proposed request. So in summary, we find that the proposed development is not consistent with the 2040 Mesa General Plan and does not meet the criteria for a minor general plan amendment outlined in Chapter 16 of the general plan, and therefore staff is recommending denial, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cassidy. Questions from board members on this one? Not seeing any. Board member Ayers, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Okay. The question I have, if the council goes ahead and approves the text amendment to the general plan that was just passed as modified with the RM5 zoning, does that change staff's recommendation on this item? Because you'd have a medical campus with, I mean, if the zoning wasn't, if the character area wasn't changed to educational, they could still build RM5 in the medical campus area, correct? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how the text amendments that were just approved by the board, if that affects the staff recommendation on this case.
Chair Crockett, so for clarification, you're asking if City Council were to approve the recommended modification to allow RM5 in the medical campus subtype?
Correct.
Then there would be no need for a minor general plan amendment.
Okay. So, all right. Okay, that answers the question. Thank you. Any other questions on this one? Board
Okay, I
Member
think
Montez?
this is where my question comes. How long has this area been vacant for what it was planned and zoned for?
So the current zoning of planned employment park with a PAD overlay and council use permit was established in 2007.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll invite the applicant up now.
So I know we've had most of this discussion already downstairs. Commissioner Ayers was not part of that, so I'm going to still cut to the chase, but I'm going to repeat some of my comments, not because I think any of you will have forgotten them since a half an hour ago or an hour ago, whatever it was, but for his benefit. This is why we have planning commissions. It's great to see planning commissioners spending time understanding issues and providing their best recommendations for their communities. In this case, it's about general plans. And general plans in Arizona are a 10-year process that are designed to be modified. And they're designed to be modified for a very good reason, and that's because none of us can see well 10 years out. In fact, I would doubt any of us would have predicted the last 10 years, and if you tried to explain to someone what happened over the last 10 years with the pandemic, with the changes in medical care, with election politics, people would be hard-pressed to understand that these things have happened. But the world changes, and it changes rapidly. The medical profession has changed rapidly, and the housing has changed rapidly. When I was starting out, the way I looked for a job was different. The kind of job I would do is different. Where I did it was different. Where I would live is different. And I think we continue to see that. We continue to see a change in housing. Arizona's grown a lot. Interestingly, when you were talking about some of the changes, it occurs to me that a very long time ago, Mesa had a hospital. It had a hospital downtown. In fact, kind of had two of them. And they were really small hospitals, because that's what hospitals were then. And if you go to a hospital today, they're a very different thing. Healthcare has changed dramatically. Arizona has imported lots and lots of people. You have an economic development department that spends most of its time trying to convince other people to come here from other places. But they have to have places to live. And whereas when I was younger, people would gladly travel quite some distance from their home to their work, largely because they wanted to have their own home, they wanted to own a home. That's not the case anymore. Young people move here, and in some cases they don't move here to stay. They just come here to work in hospitals, to go to school, to do some of those things. And it's important for them to live close. Part of that's just cultural, that's something that's important to them because they like that kind of lifestyle. Some of it's practical. The streets are not what they once were. I'm going to go back to what this case is really about, which is the support of residential and the idea that we need more housing. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those issues. By the way, this is an image, we haven't really talked about it much today, and I know this isn't the case before you, but it isn't a random thing we're asking to build. It's a specific thing, and we've gone through the process and had staff comment and made modifications accordingly. But the real problem is supportive housing, the fact that we don't have enough housing to support the uses that are important to us. We don't have enough housing to support a place for students to go to school and live. We don't have a place for healthcare workers to work in a hospital and live. It's a real problem. I think it's a unquestionable, uncontroverted problem. Some people may think otherwise. There have been all kinds of news stories. You may remember at the last hearing, I showed you several examples of front page stories about our housing crisis. City officials, mayors, the governor, housing officials have all called it a crisis, and in fact, it is. What we're really talking about here is a site that makes sense for residential. And we don't have enough residential, and residential is getting harder and harder to do. The cost of lending money for a project is more. The cost of labor is more. The cost of materials is more. Unfortunately, rents have gone up, but that gets harder and harder for people on salaries to afford. And it's largely because of supply and demand. We don't have enough housing to provide people units, and so the cost goes up. That's how the economy works. What we're talking about in this case is a site that no one from the community has objected to, and some have supported, including A.T. Still. That's pretty rare these days to have a housing site, a multifamily housing site that no one objects to. And the reason no one objects, other than staff, is because it's a good location for multifamily housing. It's on a freeway, essentially. It's not next to single-family housing. We're not going to have congestion issues. And it's going to serve two obvious populations, AT Still and the medical office uses that are around, the hospital uses. And so for those reasons, we ask you to pass this amendment, because this amendment will allow the difference between a project that won't get built and continues to add to the problems of housing, or to add 100 more units, and a place that can handle 100 more units, and to let us build the project that you saw, and I know you didn't all agree on it, but you saw before you not long ago. I'm happy to answer questions. I think you've had lots of discussion today, and I don't want to belabor the point, or as you say, beat the horse.
Thank you for that. Are there questions on this for Mr. Humantle? Board Member Sarkisian.
I have a question. Looking at this, as staff was talking about, it is 10 acres, and regarding the requirements for a specialty area, and you're trying to go into educational, and you have support from AT Still, who is your direct neighbor to the east, for quite a big portion. Was there any discussion about adding them into the educational specialty area because they are so much a portion of the reason why you're looking for that? And they are educational, so it wouldn't affect them in any way?
So we've had a lot of discussion with them. I certainly don't have any authority to speak for them, so I'll only speak for myself as it relates to these discussions. It's not lost on me that they have another case they're strongly opposed to, and it's probably created some challenges for them in working with the city, the case to the north of us. As I understand it, their opposition to the case to the north was because they had been promised in their mind by the city an educational campus. And in fact, one of the things they have always wanted since day one was housing. And in fact, when we sat down with them and showed them the images of the housing, they were super excited, and one of the guys went back to his office and tried to find some images because it was almost exactly what they had originally proposed. It's worth noting that AT Still did something else I think is really commendable. In our discussions early on, talked about the Y. There's a YMCA tucked back there as well. And the reason that exists is because AT Still believes that when they came to Mesa, they were offered this opportunity to build a campus. And rather than build their own facility, they wanted to partner. And so they partnered with the Y. And they saw us as another piece of that, sort of doing the same thing. The Y serves their students, but it's not them. And they saw us as serving them. But as it relates to specifically including them in the zoning, they didn't seem excited about that. We did talk about some early options, and they expressed other concerns with the city at that point in time and said they'd write us a letter of support, but that we would sort of be on our own. But we certainly did talk with them about specifically our uses. We talked about adding additional signage for them, which we've agreed to do to add to the campus feel and to tie them together. We went back with our site plan and prepared to add additional access points for pedestrians, again, so they could get back and forth easily. And one of the reasons AT Still said they liked us as opposed to the other uses, we didn't create a lot of traffic. To the extent that someone brought up parking earlier, I think it was staff, we see that as probably a good thing to not have too much parking. And to the extent that we run into parking problems, which we don't think we will, and we've had a parking study done to indicate that, parking works well because parking at an apartment is usually going to be busiest in the evening, and the AT Still campus, and again, we expect to have a lot of cross use, is empty at those times. So if there's plenty of places in our minds for parking solutions that we don't think will ever be required, but again, that's the point of having those uses that complement each other. Did I answer your question?
Kind of, but not really. Yeah, kind of, yeah. I don't know. And then the other question was the adjacent densities around you. I know that we talked that there's some, you have some residential
Sure.
to the west, but it's in the medical, and you're looking just for the educational. What are those?
So there are lower density residential projects near us. Those projects don't generally get built anymore. Those projects were generally designed and conceived before this area was what it is. I don't think that those projects would get built today. I don't think that they would pencil out, frankly. But they also, again, going back to my original point, if you can find a place that apartments make sense, you should put the density in reasonably that you can. And we definitely need it in this area with the hospital and other things, AT still being so close. For some reason, I wish I were in the meeting next door. It sounds like it's a lot happier.
Chair, Board Member Sarkisian, so we looked at those surrounding densities at 17.75 dwelling units an acre.
And those are generally walk-ups. What we're proposing is different. We're proposing a project that has some garaged units, that has indoor corridors as opposed to walk-up, that has elevators. So it's a different product that exists today. I don't think you do well building or renting those units, I should say, today. It's not where the world is.
Okay. Other, Board Member Peterson.
Charles, this is a bizarro world hearing because we're kind of caught in the middle, right? So even though it's a zoning case question, will you just state refresh us on number of stories of the buildings proposed and 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units, that type of thing, just for a sense of
Absolutely.
The size, and more, I think, just to clarify this term dormitory that's been kicked around in the previous.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I know it was used for other contexts, but we're proposing market rate housing, not dormitory housing. Specifically, there are 394 units. 17 of them are studios. 152 of them are 1-bedroom. 183 of them are 2 bedrooms, and 3 of them are 42 bedrooms. And you can see that it's a 4-story product.
42?
42 3-bedroom units. What did I say? I'm sorry.
You said 3 of them are 42 bedrooms.
Sorry. Well, I'm glad you clarified me on that. I also don't like these 7:30 meetings. They're problematic for me as well. Unfortunately, I'm not a coffee drinker, so it takes me some time to get moving in the morning. So let me repeat those. 17 studios, 152 1-bedrooms, 183 2-bedrooms, and 42 3-bedrooms.
And then how many stories?
It's 4 stories. It's 50 feet, 60 feet to the top of mechanical.
Okay, gotcha.
And you can see on the screen, this is an image of the project that's proposed.
Yep, 4 stories. So we're not talking about high-rise or anything. We're just talking about.
We're not. And for what it's worth, the Design Review Board had complimentary things to say about the project when we went.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I guess one more question is, does the vote on the previous case impact your path here, or strategically, I guess what direction does it go?
It affects us, of course, because we still need the council to act on those changes. I think either way, we're asking you, because we don't know what the council will do. Our request for you is to approve our requested modification to the general plan, because we don't know how council will react to your changes. It sounds like it will go as 2 forms, staff having one, you having another. So you will join us in good company as having staff not agree with you, I suppose.
Gotcha. If council were to approve the previous case, then would you still proceed with this? And the reason I'm asking is because I think in the previous hearing, there's a lot of confusion that gets introduced by having a small educational specialty area within the bigger medical specialty area that I think we're trying to wrap our heads around too.
That's a tough question to answer. Respectfully, we don't believe we need a general plan amendment. The Stillwater case recently, the staff used a different mechanism to get through the general plan. We actually think we could qualify under the existing general plan. We don't agree with staff. We don't agree with the city attorney. We had some discussions with the city attorney's office and ultimately agreed that the best path forward was to find a way where we could both agree. We both agree that our general plan amendment that we've proposed would work. Again, we don't think it's necessary lawfully, but rather than fight over that issue, we agreed to file for a general plan amendment.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair and Board Member Peterson, so both of these amendments are currently on City Council's agenda for introduction on the 1st and for action on the 8th. So regardless of that motion, staff's recommendation will continue to be denial on this general plan text amendment. Oh, I apologize. I guess the text amendment is action on the 1st.
It's just a resolution.
Any other questions for Mr. Hugh Mantle?
I do believe, as a technical point, the land has been vacant since '99 and zoned back then, but it's been a long time, to your point.
Board Member Ayers, anything for the applicant?
No, nothing right now.
Board Member Allen? Okay, thank you.
Thank you again for your time this morning.
All right, well, I will now open the public hearing on this item. And I don't see anyone from the public that's here to speak to this.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Richens submitted a card to address both of those items.
Okay, great. Then we'll have Mr. Richens come back up and you'll have 3 minutes.
I missed you guys. Board Member Montez, for your history, Cassidy actually wrote it, the staff report, and I know she handles a lot of cases, so we're going to give her a little grace on her dates. But prior to 1997, it was agriculture, and so probably grew some hay and carrots or something. In 2000, it was rezoned to industrial, light industrial to be specific. In 2004, it went to the current PEP PAD in 2004. And so it's been vacant almost 20 years under the current zoning. And then it's always been vacant, basically. Just a couple of quick comments related to this. There's been a lot talked about unintended consequences, and we dealt with that all the time. And it's important to think about unintended consequences of all these, but sometimes you need intended consequences. When you rezone something, it's with the intention of getting those kinds of uses at that place. You have a UPS delivery facility, the industrial case to the north of you, to the north of this project. I'm not going to litigate that case or argue it, but you know, I ran a food bank for the last 5.5 years, and it's 43,000 square foot warehouse, 4 loading docks. We had trucks coming and going all the time on that. And so our focus, if our focus is indeed to preserve jobs at this location, you know, warehousing jobs are okay jobs, but in a warehouse, there's not a ton of jobs there, right? So, you know, our warehouse portion probably employed about 15 people. We had 50 employees, but they were all mostly focused on running a charity and agencies. And so I'm not sure how an industrial zoning fits with medical. So we have a lot of contradictions going on here. And so with all the contradictions that are happening here, let's focus on what our intended consequences here, and not maybe set aside or unintended. If we feel we need housing at this location, you have legal mechanisms that we've all been going through to do it. So do it. If we think this is a great project in the right place, then let's go ahead and support that. And we've gone through all the legal mechanisms to make that happen. For something that has been vacant for forever, and intentionally zoned since at least 2000 and 2004, and to have no proposal, the market's sending a signal there, and a signal that's long overdue, that maybe that's not quite right. And that's okay, we don't get it right every single time, but that's why we do these amendments from time to time. They're important to the process. You're an important part of that process to vet this out. I really appreciate, whether you support it or you don't, the thoughtfulness of this conversation. It's been really heartening that the people that get appointed to this board in my city still really care a lot about doing the right thing, and I appreciate that. I believe the right thing here, and we have all the legal mechanisms to do it, is to build this project. So I encourage you to do it. I encourage you to support the future of AT Still, and be intentional about your consequence. And when you vote yes on this, it's sending a signal that this is the intended consequence. And then we can move forward with this project. I guess we'll go to council next so we can see what they decide. But appreciate your thoughtfulness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richens. Any other public comment on this? I'm not seeing any, so I'll close the public hearing. And now open the item for discussion among the board members. Board Member Sarkisian.
Can I ask a question of staff again? I know we just discussed it, but pending the previous case goes through with or without the addendum or whatever, can you go over again the criteria for like meeting a sub area or even the specialty area? Because we were talking about that downstairs regarding anchors and what qualifies and all that kind of stuff.
Chair, Board Member Sarkisian, yes. Give me a minute to pull up the exact text. Okay, so for the medical campus, when we talk about an anchor medical establishment, it's defined as a hospital, included the associated medical office buildings, a medical clinic included associated medical office buildings, or a medical school campus that constitutes at least 10% of the total character area or contains at least one building that's used for a hospital, medical clinic, or medical school and is at least 90,000 square feet.
Was it either or? I think it was either 10%, 90,000 or, okay.
So that's for the medical. The educational is very similar language. So the anchor would be, anchor is defined as either a high school campus, including associated athletic fields, athletic buildings, and performance art buildings, or a college campus, including associated athletic fields, and associated art buildings. Same with junior high or elementary school that is adjacent to a high school campus. And once again, that it would constitute at least 10% of the character area or contain at least one building that's 90,000 square feet in size.
Okay, and so the questions we had downstairs, which I believe a couple of us were still confused on, or like were confused downstairs, was in the language, it says 10% of specialty area versus individual medical or individual, right?
Right, because the overall character area is specialty, and then it's broken down into subtypes. So as long as 10%
Because this one would be like 100% of educational, but it's inside a larger specialty?
Correct.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions or any other discussion on this? Board Member Peterson.
Yeah, so to try to step out of the procedural and technical rabbit hole that it feels like we're in, and just to look at this holistically, in my mind, we're talking about, is this an appropriate place for a 4-story apartment multifamily development to go? And with when the zoning case came through previously, I was in support of that because I think from a good planning perspective that this is an appropriate site. The building is it feels like it's the appropriate site for this use. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of layers of approvals and different things that have happened here over the years, and as we can see, nothing has developed. And meanwhile, these medical facilities and different things have chosen their locations. Everything's kind of picked a spot, and this feels very complementary, very appropriate for this location. It says a lot for a multifamily project like this to not have had any public neighbor opposition at all, and that even yields more to the appropriateness of it on a major arterial street, and the location where it is. And so for that reason, and procedurally, I get that there's a lot of different directions here. If approving this is another tool to get to that end, then I would be in which may or may not, depending on how city council acts here, this may be dropped if there's a shorter path to get there. But from my position, I would be in support of this minor general plan amendment.
Other discussion?
I'll just say, I guess Shelley, or sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just
Go ahead.
said, when I was looking at this initially, I did have concerns because it felt like round, square peg, round hole, being into that it would be 100%, residential in this educational, but being that it's part of a larger size. And I do feel that it serves specifically mostly the educational side. I would prefer it to, that's why I asked that question. I feel like the overall goal of this area would be with AT still to be part of that educational hotspot, because I think it would work really well together with educational right next to, as in other areas where you had the medical next to it. Because they do serve each other. And it's kind of just, we're looking at definitions here of what's this, what's that. But I do agree with the residential here, fits with what is needed to boost that area to just, the intensity here, I think will further drive the intensity behind it and along that area in the economic development sense, and boost also AT still to further grow and expand and invest in that area. So while I had some concerns, but hearing that the educational is the sub area, but the specialty area, as long as the specialty area has that tenant anchor, I feel like it's met that criteria and it feeds that tenant anchor, which qualifies as either medical or educational. So that's why I feel like I'm leaning that way on this one.
Okay. Board Member Allen.
Thank you. I guess my opinion is the same as it was before. I was opposed to this project, and the reason that I'm opposed to this project is several different things. One, we talk about all the apartments being needed for this location in the hospital. The hospital, I live in that area, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 6 apartment. With the 2 that are proposed, there's going to be at least 6 apartment complexes surrounding this hospital area. And I think that we just approved another apartment complex, a couple of weeks ago or about a month ago or something like that, kind of in this area. And I do believe, I still am a firm believer and a strong supporter of economic development. And I think that there are other viable locations that they can look at to put this type of a density there. And I don't think, just my opinion, I'm sticking with my original vote, is that I think that we need to preserve the employment districts and employment areas, because we have built apartments on some of the other employment districts on Baseline and Greenfield. And I think we're just slowly eating away at that, and we've got to at least maintain what's there now. But that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Allen. Board Member Pitcher.
I'd just like to agree with Board Member Allen. I'm concerned about the loss of these economic engines that we'd have. I don't think putting in a large apartment complex is going to drive economic development. It's going to take it away. So I'm still opposed to this. I don't think, and I agree with staff on this as far as being very selective where we're putting in RM5. This isn't it.
Thanks. Thank you. And I, my perspective on this, it's not a surprise to people. I agree with what Board Members Pitcher and Allen have said on this one. I'm a little troubled by this because I think we're trying to, as I mentioned earlier, fit a square peg in a round hole. But anyway, any other comments? Board Member Montez, do you have anything to add? No. Board Member Ayers, anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, if we don't have any further discussion, I will entertain a motion on this item. Board Member Peterson.
I'll move to approve ZON 22-01129 Millennium Superstition Springs Minor General Plan Amendment District 2 within the 5700 to 5900 blocks of East Baseline Road, within the 1800 to 1900 blocks of South Sunview, and within the 5700 to 5900 blocks of East Inverness Avenue. Located west of Record Road on the north side of Baseline Road, minor general plan amendment from Specialty Medical Campus to Specialty Educational Campus. This request will allow for a multiple residence development with recommendation for approval.
Oh, well, the staff recommendation on this is denial.
Yeah, so.
That's okay. His motion was to recommend approval of it.
Okay,
That's okay.
gotcha. Okay, do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote on this one. Oh, I'm sorry. Board Member Ayers
Yes.
and Board Member Allen. You're on mute.
No.
No, okay. So by your vote of 4 yeses and 3 nos, you have passed this item.
Thank you, and thank you again for making time for a special meeting.
You're welcome. Good to have you here. So, Michelle, is there anything else on our agenda today to cover?
There's no other items to discuss on the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, say that again.
There are no other additional items to discuss today,
Okay,
Mr.
thank
Chairman.
you. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor, vote.
Aye.
Aye.
We'll go ahead and vote.
Aye.
Well, okay, it sounds like it's unanimous, so we are adjourned. Thank you. I've got to run off.